Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to First and 10. My name is Cam, and yeah, I know it's been a little bit. I've been messing around with a couple of different setups here, and I don't know, we're gonna give this a shot. It is bright and early Sunday morning. I just woke up about 20 minutes ago, took a quick shower, and got my coffee here in this fine goblet. And I wanted to get into some sleepers. I felt that was only right. I mean, we're getting close to the draft. The big boards are mostly established. I'll end up posting my final big board here soon, but yeah, let's go ahead and get into some sleepers. Now, my first guy is someone I've talked about in depth on this channel a little bit in just my few videos. Bashal Tutin, running back from Virginia Tech. He is at the moment 77 on my current big board. There's been a little bit of fluctuation here, but 77, 78, 79, right around there. Um, I think he's a third round talent. Easily, in my opinion, frankly. His acceleration and burst are they're elite. He came in at 5'9" and a quarter and 206 pounds at the combine. He's got a good build. Like he's small, but it's kind of that Aaron Jones. Devin Singletary is another guy I think of. It's a compact frame, and the contact balance, the power for his size is absolutely acceptable. Um, there are some injury concerns. However, I don't think that there's really any concern. I think he's got three down ability at the NFL level. His receiving, his pass catching ability at the Senior Bowl looked good. It looked refined. He wasn't asked to do it a whole lot at Virginia Tech here. I've got his stats pulled up. 23 catches this year, 27 catches for 239 last year, only 81 yards this season. It was just dump off stuff. Nothing really, nothing really relevant at all. However, at the Senior Bowl, he showed the ability to catch the ball, and he looked fluid in his routes. His hand looked smooth. So I'm going to give him a shot. I just he's just the guy I've got a gut feeling about. Started his career at North Carolina A&T. And was really good there before transferring to Virginia Tech in his junior season. I mean, he runs a 4.32. It's easily there on tape. He's the fastest player in this draft, regardless. And 40.5 inch vertical, 10-10 broad jumps, great too for the measurables. I mean, I think in a wide zone system, really any zone system, he's just I have a gut feeling about this guy. He's got return ability too. In 2023, 19 returns for 550 yards, 2 return touchdowns. I just Man, he's just so dynamic. He's so explosive. And he runs with juice. I don't know. I love his running ability. You could get him 10 to 15 carries at the NFL level. 10 to 15 peak carries a game. I just I feel like the sky's the limit for him, and he's probably going to go fourth or fifth round. Realistically, someone might take him back into day three just because of the athletic ability. Um, the upside is there, and there's a couple of guys that I've seen in the mock draft in the NFL draft world that like Tootin a lot. So you never know. I think I've said this a little bit before. I'm a huge Minnesota Vikings fan, and I am pounding the table for them to take him at 97 here. Would love it. I know we've got Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones, who are two great running backs already, but I love Bashal Tutin so much. But let's go ahead and get in my next sleeper here. I've got another running back. Okay, another running back here, a little further down. This is a deep sleeper, but Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the running back from Arizona, I've got him as RB15 on my board. He's closer to the 130 range, 120 on my big board. However, I believe he's in the 200s on the consensus. He's a really, really interesting player. He reminds me a lot of Devin Neal. I think very similar type guy in this class. Really good vision, good overall size. Krosky-Merritt came in at 5'11", 208 pounds. He looks a little bigger on tape. I think he probably plays closer to 215. And I want to say, I'm going to assume that he dropped the weight to run faster, which he's not a great athlete on tape. So he ran a 4.45 at his pro day, I believe, which is faster than I would have projected. So I'm going to assume that he dropped some weight to run that, frankly. But anyway, yeah, he's a really interesting player. I think he'd be good in a power system. It could run some inside zone as well, but when you're talking about duo gap, all of that, just goal line stuff. I think he really fits there in teams like the Falcons, Texans, Steelers. Just kind of getting that low cost power back. There's a lot of like Tyler Algier there from what I can remember from a couple of years ago out of BYU, who went in the fifth round. I think Krosky Merritt fifth round is absolutely reasonable for someone like that. But and kind of the way that I compare him with Devin Neal is they've both got really good vision, and they're not the best athlete, but they're shifty enough. They run through space well. They kind of they find the right little holes, and they're able to just kind of maneuver through for extra yards, and then use their power and contact balance whenever it applies itself. He's not super guard. Had a dog barking at my neighbors across the street there, so I had to stop for a second. But and also I want to also preface this because I didn't start out with this, but with Krosky Merritt, he didn't play this year. He played one game with Arizona. All of his production comes from New Mexico, so you have to factor that in, and that's also a big part as why he's just projected so low. But I have a good feeling about him. I think when you think about those James Robinsons, the Tyler Algiers, of course. Who is that other C.J. Anderson from like early 2010s? That was right when I was first getting into fantasy football. C.J. Anderson was one of my first waiver wire pickups back then. That was a fun time. But there's a lot of similarities there. I think he's just smooth. He's just smooth, and there's not a ton of athletic ability, but he just looks like a football player. And I think when you're talking about that range of running backs, you're either going to take a guy who has, in this case, like a vision, kind of shifty, he looks like a football player, or you're basing it off of athletic upside, and Krosky Merritt falls in the latter there. So you got him in the 130s. I think fifth to seventh round is a realistic range, but he's a fun guy. And if you don't get Devin Neal in the third or fourth, I think Krosky Merritt is the backup plan for that in the later rounds. But let's go ahead and move on here. You know what? I'll go ahead and get into quarterbacks. I started out with running backs just because I love those guys so much, but we'll try and go in a little bit of positional order here. But my quarterback, Tyler Shough, quarterback from Louisville. Okay, so main preface with Tyler Shough are injuries. He is much older than, I believe he is 25 right now, or he'll be 25 once the season starts. He's played 6 years in college. However, he's really played like 4 half seasons and 1 full season, if I remember that correctly. But great size, 6'5", 244 or 224, excuse me. While I get his stats pulled up here. But Tyler Shough, famously backup for Justin Herbert back at Oregon. He was that guy who was supposed to take over after Herbert. If you kind of remember way back, and there showed flashes, and it showed flashes, but couldn't stay healthy. Ended up going to Texas Tech. Again, showed flashes, couldn't stay healthy, and finally ended up at Louisville here for his 7th college season. That is insane. But he really does look polished. He looks like he's been in college for 7 years. At Louisville, he played a little safe. I'll say, kind of had that. I guess when you think of it in the classic sense, like how backup quarterbacks just check down a lot. Kind of the Alex Smith game manager type. But he's got a good arm, and he makes throws. When he does make throws, you see an NFL level arm on tape, and I think it's right with Cam Ward, and it's a B plus, A minus NFL caliber arm. There's a throw against Notre Dame that in the second quarter he throws for a touchdown where he's kind of falling away, and he just more or less sidearms it through multiple defenders. Guy catches it in the back of the end zone here, and it's one of the most impressive throws of the college football season, in my opinion. He, I think, would fit really well in more of a classic kind of pro or West Coast style system. He's got athleticism to play in the Shanahan scheme, and so I think he is versatile enough to kind of play throughout. However, those teams that are, I think of Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh has to take quarterback there, but maybe like the Saints, the Raiders, um, a potential team, Jets potentially, just a team that's got a guy that's going to quarterback this year, but if something happens and you're kind of trying to play for the future too a little bit there, I think Shuck could come in and look really impressive. He just seems to have this command of the offense now, and you would hope for that after so long. But at the end of the day, he hasn't played a ton. I mean, still under 1,000 pass attempts in his career in college. Like, that's going to equate to like 2.5 years starting full time, realistically. So there's still some theoretical upside there, I think, outside of his age. And in terms of draft projection, mostly mid rounds. I've got him in the 70s on my big board, and I think he probably goes third round. Keep going, but Tyler Shuck, regardless, his processing is solid. He seems mature. He's got a live arm, good athleticism. I feel good about him being able to come in and play if he needs to. Maybe there's a little Davis Mills there from the Texans a couple years back. That wouldn't surprise me. It's just if he could stay healthy, like I think if he was healthy throughout his college career, I think he would have been a first-round quarterback at some point because the tools are there. He's an interesting guy, and I'm curious to see. I've got him as QB3 on my board. I don't think he's going to be QB3 because I know Milrose and Jackson Dart have been getting a lot of first-round hype for some reason, but it's there, and I completely understand and believe that those guys are going to go before Shuck regardless. There's only a few people that I've seen.
Moving to his left, looking, back across the middle, touchdown Louisville, Ja'Corey Brooks.
Comes up into the pocket, then he has to move left. We've seen him do this a number of times today. Watch him drop it down. Little Kent to Colby with a guy right in his face. Talk about looking down the gun barrel. Bone right in his face. He flips it high and firm on the back line as you're falling down and taking.
I just couldn't help but think that this guy's going to work in the NFL, or at least this guy's going to be a capable guy. Maybe a Ryan Fitzpatrick. Oh, that would be fun. The more I think about it, there's some Fitzpatrick there, and Tyler Shuck. I don't know. We'll see. I'm curious to see who takes him. I hope he gets playing time as a rookie because he's a fun player. He's a fun quarterback. But you know what? Actually, this feels relevant. Let's go ahead and transition to the wide receiver from Louisville, Ja'Corey Brooks. He is my deep sleeper wide receiver for this list, and naturally, I found him watching Tyler Shuck. Right now, Ja'Corey Brooks is like in the 260s on the big board consensus from what I saw, but he's really interesting. Former Alabama transfer, actually. Okay, but here we go. I got his stats to load finally. But Brooks, 6'2", 184. He had 61 catches for 1,013 yards and 9 touchdowns this past season. 2 years ago in 22 for Bama, he had 674 yards and 8 touchdowns. So he produced at Bama, and this guy's got talent. He's a good intermediate deep route runner for his size. Not super explosive athlete. He didn't participate at the combine, unfortunately, but he's really polished. Like, just as a possession guy, I felt like there were multiple times on third down, Tyler Shuck was just throwing the ball up to Ja'Corey Brooks on those 50-50 things, and Brooks came down with it. But, I mean, overall, Ja'Corey Brooks, he's just a really polished receiver. He's not like a true separator, but, when you're talking about slants, digs, comeback routes, and he, ends over the middle of the field, he's got good size, and, he produced to Alabama. He ultimately got buried behind some really good wide receivers and had to transfer, and he never really broke out at Alabama, but he's got all the traits that you would hope for. And when you're talking about wide receiver 3 or 4 at the next level, this is a guy who's not projected to go anywhere near the top 4 rounds. So, just from what I see here, I think he's an NFL body. He's kind of a poor man's Michael Gallup in a way. Ultimately, it's going to be down to fit, and It'd be fun if him and Tyler Shuck ended up going somewhere like the Saints. I would like for him to go to a, I guess in the sense of bad team, because I think he could be one of those guys who, when you're talking about late in the season, just those rough teams are putting out their wide receiver 4, 5s, and 6s, and everyone, he could have some 8 for 77 games, some 6 for 72. I think Ja'Cory Brooks overall, really polished. I like what I see from him. Okay. For the next guy here, let's go ahead and transition over to the defensive side of the ball. I've got one edge player that I really like as a late round sleeper. I believe he's 160s on the consensus big board right now, so we're talking 5th, 6th round pick. But I have seen a few people interested in this guy, but Ahmed Hassanein, I hope I'm saying that name right, the edge from Boise State. 6'2" and 3/8 here, 267 pounds. I think he'd fit really well as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 system, or kind of a wide 9 front. He's got some versatility there. That size profile plays well when you're talking about a developmental edge player. But the big thing with this guy is his effort. He's raw. We'll talk about that in a minute, but he's got real developmental upside. The effort's there. He's got great speed to power. When you're talking about this draft range of players, a really good first step, and I mean the motor is just relentless. Kind of a fun thing about this guy is he's from Egypt, late football guy. Like, he came into football late, but he's got background in CrossFit and jiu-jitsu, so you can really see that kind of that athleticism and just that the coachability, the effort that you would think from someone who's in CrossFit and jiu-jitsu. That's just a relentless, agile kind of high effort, high energy type of workout stuff. So and you can see it with him. Now he's really raw. Not a whole lot of power, not a whole lot of pass rush moves. He's still working on counter. His hands are okay, but he ended up with 12.5 sacks at Boise State at Mountain West level. So I mean, he was able to dominate at that level of the field with his athletic profile and with his abilities. So it's not like this isn't a Shamar Stewart type of raw athlete where he hasn't produced. This guy has produced. It's at a lower level. But when we're talking about a day 3 pass rusher with upside, I mean, this is a guy who I think could step in and really look fun in the preseason. It wouldn't surprise me if he has like 2.5 sacks in the preseason or something, and people are like, okay, this guy needs to be our 3rd edge rusher off the bench, because I know there's always those fun preseason guys. I think of I guess just in Minnesota terms, forgive me, but like Bo Richter of this past year. Actually, wasn't Bo Richter another Boise State guy? I think he was, but regardless, Hassanein he's really fun. I think in a couple of years he could really kind of explode onto the scene and be one of those real valuable rotational pass rushers that gets you 6 to 8 sacks a season. In a good system if it all works out and develops. But he's a fun guy for sure. He's a fun guy, versatile, effort, and when you're talking defensive line, just give me a guy who wants to get after the quarterback in the 5th round, and that's what Hassanein is. So, yeah, the edge from Boise State. Now on the defensive side of the ball here, I do have one more edge player, Ethan Downs. Edge out of Oklahoma. He is a guy that I'm pretty sure almost no one knows about for the most part. Downs is a defensive end out of OU. He's a bigger guy. He kind of the role he played for OU was that number 2 run stuffing defensive end position, you could say. He measured in at 6'3" and 3/8 or 3/4 and 269 pounds. So I mean, he's got great size. You think of like a 4-3 kind of base defensive end situation to run stopping lines, or I think he could also bulk up and play some more 3-4 end, kind of that 4-eye 3-tech type role if he adds on weight, because he's a real athlete. 32 bench press reps, 4.7 40-yard dash. The main reason that I've got Downs this high is I didn't expect the athleticism. He was a good athlete at OU. You could see some of the flashes, but he really just wasn't asked to truly rush the passer, and just do that for OU. But when he did, ultimately, I think kind of my write-up with Ethan Downs was he was the kind of guy that didn't win on traits, but he's got a really relentless motor. He's strong. He plays physical. And, I mean, he was productive ultimately. And then he goes into the combine and then he shows traits. So I'm like, okay, there's something. There's got to be something there then. He's not super flashy on tape, but, I mean, he's an NFL athlete, and maybe there's a little risk of him being a tweener, but you're talking about such a low range. He's in the 200s consensus range, maybe even 300s last I checked. I've got him at 198 on my big board, and that's the highest I've seen from anyone. So, and what is 198? Like, that's late 6th round, beginning of the 7th there. So, I don't know, but he totally might end up going undrafted. But he's a fun guy. I don't know. He's a fun guy I think he fits well into, like the Giants, Saints, Steelers, Ravens, those teams that get those high effort rotational rushers. And he is solid against the run, so he's going to be able to do that. And then, anything that comes with the pass rushing upside that he's got traits there, just anything that comes with that is house money. So I'm willing to take a bet on that in the 6th, 7th round for a guy that I know was in a Brett Venables system for 4 years, so he's gonna, he's got a smart head on his shoulders. He's gonna know defenses. He's gonna know schemes. So, Ethan Downs, out of Oklahoma. But that is my last edge player. We've got a couple of corners who I am really excited to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into them here. Okay, for my next few guys, I've got 3 corners here. I'm just gonna go in the order that they are on my big board and start from there. So starting off, I've got Caleb Bransaw, the corner from Tulane. There's a possible safety conversion. He is small. However, Caleb Bransaw just destroyed the combine. 4.33 40-yard dash, 10.9 broad jump, 40-inch vertical. And he came in 5'11 and 3/8, 197 pounds. Really, really interesting. He's got elite speed, and he plays at good size. He's physical. He's got good play strength. He's really solid in the nickel, and of course, he's got the top end speed. Good tackler too for the given size. I'm really, really intrigued by his special teams ability early on as well. I think he could be a special teams ace, and just given that, I mean, he'll have a role on an NFL field for years if that's the case. Excuse me. But I mean, when you're thinking about that, I think he's got real potential to be a kind of a hidden gem. I don't know if he's gonna be able to hold up in man coverage. He's solid in zone, but ultimately, I don't know if he's gonna be able to handle just man coverage full time NFL, just snap in, snap out. But when we're talking about a guy who's like 200 on the consensus board here, he's really, really fun. He's got instincts, and he's an elite athlete, and he can tackle. So, I mean, those are traits that I'm willing to bet on from a late round corner here, Caleb Bransaw out of Tulane. I really like him. And I do want to add in that his head coach said that this guy is a football junkie, and he watches film. He draws up all 22 of the defense. So I'm willing to just combine that, the versatility to play nickel, safety, athleticism, good praise from the coach, and solid size, and plays physical. I'm gonna bet on that. I would take him.
And a 3rd down and 3. Daly falls forward after getting hit. Faced a lot of pressure coming in to the game. They're going to keep it on the ground on 1st down. Sawchuk.
You throw the ball into 3 defenders, nothing's good's going to happen.
He was in the 200.
Ward. Let's see what Reed can do here. 3rd and 4. The slant incomplete.
He's really
Panthers playing from behind again as Granger goes to the air, and it's intercepted.
All of my guys had, 2 of my guys, I guess, had pretty good combines. There's another couple. Let me get into, this isn't who I'm going to talk about, but I do want to just mention Saw Frazier. I debated between him and Ransaw. Saw Frazier is 6'3", and I want to say he had like a 1.5 10-yard split, really similar 40-yard dash. Kind of a scheme, just like pick your preference there. I'm not as familiar with Zoff Frazier's tape. I will say I've watched more Ransaw tape, and I feel good about Ransaw, so I've just kind of settled in on him as my guy. But Zoff Frazier, I could absolutely understand why he'd be on other people's sleeper list, just given the traits and size. But my actual corner that I'm going to talk about here, Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers. A little smaller, 5'11", 175, but he still managed to run a 4.3 940, so we're still talking great speed. 11.2 broad jump, and a 36.5-inch vertical, so he's got explosiveness. I think he'd be a really good special teamer earlier in his career as well. But he's fast, he's explosive, he's twitched up, he can run well with receivers deep. And you know, when you're thinking about like the Ravens, Jags, Chargers, teams like that who are going to need to cover those deep receivers in their division. Papers flying over there. I think really solid guy who you could draft in and, you know, feel comfortable if he had to play as a rookie, but I think he's got a role in special teams earlier in his career. And, you know, a consensus around him, I've seen 190s, 200s, big boards. I believe I've got him at 160 right now, but I really like him a lot. Now, reason why he's fallen to day 3 is he's light. His body just needs to develop, but he's got athletic upside and he seems to be coachable. This Rutgers team has started to put out some really intriguing NFL options over the last year or so. So, you know, Kyle Minogue guy's another guy who I really like. So maybe Rutgers is starting to kind of develop some fun players here now. Who's that guy? I know they've got their old coach. I can't remember his name now. But anyway, regardless, Robert Longerbeam, I really like him. I think he's a fun day 3 developmental core who I'd be pounding the table for in the fifth round. Yeah, you know, you could take him 4th round. Okay, so my last corner is a different type of guy. This is a guy who I think would fit well in a cover 3 system, kind of depth as a nickel. More of a zone guy, not flashy athleticism. In fact, didn't participate in the combine. And in fact, I don't know if this guy's on anyone's radar, but Corey Black, the corner out of Oklahoma State. No official, he's 6 foot. I believe he's 184 pounds. He's not super built. He is skinny, but I think he's bigger than Longerbeam. So that's just my guess. I would probably also assume 4.5, high 4.4 speed, but he's smart. He's really disciplined in off-man coverage and then in zone coverage. You know, teams like Detroit, Chicago, Seattle, kind of who still run a lot more cover 3, Indianapolis. There's nothing super flashy about him, but he's composed. You know, he doesn't panic, and he's got game reps. He started for a while at Oklahoma State here, I believe 2 years. You know, there's something about him. There's something about him. Oklahoma State was expected to be a lot better this season. No, I apologize. Actually, I got a little off track there. But where I was going with this is, you know, there's not really a ton of athleticism on tape, but he's really polished and, you know, shows good instincts. He doesn't really panic. He ran a 4.35 at his pro day. So, and, you know, it's not that on tape. Like, you know, we see the Jahdae Barron thing where he shot up, and I won't even lie, I thought he was going top 10 for like 2 weeks here, but then you watch the tape, it's like, okay, he's not 4.29 speed on tape, but it shows that something's in there. You know, there's something to be unlocked, and, you know, I mean, when we're talking about, you know, just deep day 3 corners, you know, I'm interested, and I wanted to get into this as well. Black played 48% of his snaps in man coverage this past year. So he's got experience in it, and, you know, he might not be the best at it, but there's certainly potential. I think he's a guy who could step in and look competent in an NFL system if, you know, it hit the fan and he had to play as a 7th round rookie or whatever. You know, he's an intriguing, completely different type of player than Longerbeam and Ransaw, but, you know, for that type of player, that would be my sleeper at corner, and I haven't really heard Corey Black's name at all anywhere. So, I mean, he's a really interesting player. Wasn't invited to the combine, if you know, that gives you any comparison. But yeah, he's a really interesting guy, Corey Black at Oklahoma State. And you know what though, that actually wraps up my list. Thank you guys. I hope the audio is going to turn out okay. There is a guy mowing off in the distance, and it's been a little windy. So I know an interesting experience here, but I don't know. I wanted to try something outside. I thought it might be fun, and anyway, hope you guys have a great day and take care. I will be posting something shortly here soon.